This is the new Mazda 3, and as soon as the prices were released, I heard the internet moan about how expensive it is. Okay, 30,000 euro for a car I'm driving today does seem like a lot, but compare it to a similarly spec'd Volkswagen Golf or Toyota Corolla, yes, the new Corolla, former Auris, and you will realize that the 122 horsepower Mazda 3 with an automatic gearbox is actually 10 to 15% cheaper than the competition. It's the compact car segment that's become really expensive these days, not Mazda 3. And now get this, Mazda 3 is actually even cheaper when you look at it, because the new strategy of the Japanese car maker is to shift the brand upmarket. I tried to ignore the part of the press release that says premium, but when I heard it from the PR officer, premium became flesh. The Mazda Premium philosophy is all about design, mastery, joyfulness, etc. I mean, if you're into that sort of thing, I respect that, but I'm more interested in how this car drives, and this is where things get interesting, although not necessarily for the reasons you expect. Let's talk design first and how it impacts the driving experience. There are several approaches to car design. There's the German approach, where everything has its function and there is no place for quirks. Then there's the Scandinavian approach, where function is important, but so is form. Then there's the French approach, where everything is upside down, and the Italian approach, where everything is beautiful. And finally, we have the Japanese approach, where the designers cut the design with samurai swords and they draw sharp lines, while the engineers are shaving microns off here and there just to improve efficiency without changing anything, because if it works, then it works.
There must have been quite a sword fight in Mazda, because windows seem to be more of an aesthetic than a functional feature in the whole body design. At first glance, everything looks fine, but that's just an optical illusion. I'll tape everything on the edges that you can't see through from the inside. And now the tape comes off and... there's no real difference in visibility.
But Mazda 3 is not the only car with poor visibility. If you want a greenhouse on wheels, get a French minivan or a crossover or whatever they make these days. Behind the wheel, it's generally comfortable as long as you go for the electric seats with lumbar support. Depending on the market, they may be a part of some sort of a luxury pack. I was unable to establish whether these electric seats with lumbar support are significantly different from the regular ones, but I have driven in both, and the regular seats gave me the worst backache ever. In its presentation, Mazda clearly shows these electric seats, which are indeed some of the most comfortable I have sat in.
I had the opportunity to drive 2 trim levels, because I really wanted a manual and Mazda really wanted me to drive a car with all the extra driving aids. Hence I got to experience different seats, different wheels and different gearboxes. Regardless of the trim level, the interior is finished in soft touch materials and there's a lot of silver accents as well. There is also some piano black, which on closer inspection turns out to be fake carbon. And it's already scratched. I wish there was some ambient lighting, because at night all this interesting design hides in the darkness.
Regardless of the market and pricing policy, the interior quality should be the same across the range. What may differ is whether you spec the car by choosing different trim levels, like it is in Poland, or simply adding equipment packs, like in Germany, for example. Now, these equipment packs may include things like better seats, and these you do want. There may be some extra safety systems, or this Bose premium sound system with nice silver. speaker covers. I'm no car audio expert, so all I can say is that it plays loud and clean. A huge change for the better is the new MZD Connect infotainment system with an 8.8-inch display. That's from here to there, 8.8 inches. It resembles the BMW iDrive from a few years ago, and you get, let me just show you, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. That said, when you launch your Google or Apple SatNav, you lose traffic sign information. Mazda knows about the issue, and I assume it will get fixed in a software update in the future. Now, the center display has been moved towards the windscreen, and you can no longer operate it by touch. But even in the previous generation, the touch functionality was available only when the car was stopped, so no great loss. Good thing the buttons around the swivel wheel correspond with the functions of Android Auto here. It's easier to operate than, for example, in a Mercedes, some of the older Mercedes, where you just have to use the swivel wheel rather than press some buttons.
I also found some features which are usually reserved for the premium segment and not as well implemented too. You can set the car to launch the front camera every time you start the engine. For example, you always reverse park, so when you want to leave, you will need the front camera. By the way, safety features on the new Mazda 3 include not just cross-traffic monitoring when reversing, but also when going forward. For example, when you have to drive out of a gate and you have limited visibility.
Okay, so I've seen this feature in other cars, but I've never seen such good implementation. So, in a car, usually if there is a tilting mirror during reversing, only one mirror tilts, and if there are two of them tilting, you usually have to dig deep into the settings on the infotainment screen. Here, all you have to do is press a button to select the mirror, left or right. And if you don't want to use it at all, you can just turn it off. Comfortable driving position is important. Mazda 3 has a high window line, so I actually had to raise the seat a bit, but there is still decent amount of headroom. It's a shame that the right mirror aligns with the A-pillar and there is a huge blind spot there. Maybe that's why Mazda pushes that front cross traffic assist system. Everything is within reach. There are cup holders, there is sensible storage, unless you're the one sitting in the back. Ow! Sorry. One of the versions I've driven was a mid-spec manual on 16-inch rims, and this is a high-spec automatic on 18s. In the Benz, the 16-inch rims model felt like it was leaning too much on the high tire wall. In the 18-inch car, it's much better, but I still get the feeling that if you take a corner too fast or the corner is too sharp, the car does have a slight tendency to understeer. According to Mazda, the steering ratio is a relatively direct 15.6 to 1, but if you go faster through a tighter turn or a roundabout, the front is all over the place.
I'm also not a fan of Mazda going back to a twist beam rear suspension. Apparently it's a matter of strategy and assigning one platform to compact and smaller models, while Mazda 6 and larger models will get a different platform with multi-link suspension. I don't mind the twist beam in general, but since Mazda wants to be all premium, it could do with a more dynamic setup for the Mazda 3 suspension.
But even on 18-inch rims, the suspension is great when it comes to damping. Soundproofing is also good, however the automatic shifter spoils everything. It seems to get lost when the road conditions get a bit more challenging. It's jerky and it can get lost, for example, if you lift off just before a junction and then you want to get back on the power. And it just... what the... It's just not a very good gearbox. Now, there is a sports button, but I think all that does, it just holds the revs a bit higher, and that's pretty much it. Now, the manual shifter is a real joy, but steer clear of the automatic.
At launch in Europe, Mazda 3 is available with a 122 horsepower Skyactiv-G engine Some markets also get a diesel. The fancy Skyactiv-X will be available later in the autumn. On paper, the 122 horsepower engine doesn't seem like much. 10.4 seconds from 0 to 100 km per hour with a manual and 10.8 seconds with an automatic. That's quicker than the equivalent hybrid Corolla, but slower than a Volkswagen Golf or a Peugeot 308. That said, with 213 Nm of torque, the Skyactiv-G engine has some grunt at relatively low RPM.
Mazda also uses a mild hybrid system. It's a 24-volt system. Why not a 48-volt like in some bigger, more expensive cars? Well, Mazda says it's about the price, the weight, and what it needs to power. Higher voltage is not required.
The mild hybrid system helps lower fuel consumption. It uses kinetic energy recuperated during braking to power onboard electric systems. The mild hybrid also improves functioning of the stop and start system as well as helps boost the engine. At least that's the theory. From my experience, when the car stops at the lights, the engine remains off for a relatively short amount of time. Moreover, in the manual transmission model, stop and start, or I-stop in Mazda speak, turns the engine back on quite late, not after pressing the clutch, but as you start putting the car in gear. Try a quick launch from the lights and you may end up stalling. And then it's not enough to just press the clutch and turn everything back on again. I had to turn the ignition off and restart.
The Skyactiv-G engine can shut off 2 out of 4 cylinders when the car is driving at a constant speed with little load. The technology is not new, but for the first time I actually feel vibrations when the engine is running on only 2 cylinders. The vibrations are more prominent in the manual car and they occur around 1500 RPM when you're in the gear indicated by the Eco Nani. I asked Mazda about it and apparently they are aware of this issue.
And how's the fuel economy? I spent more time in the manual model outside the city and I got below 6 liters per 100 kilometers. Around the city, automatic model used around 8.7 liters per 100 kilometers. According to WLTP, Mazda 3 should use around 6.5 liters combined, so I guess it's close enough. Outside the city, active cruise control with lane assist works better than in the Mazda 6, but in city traffic it's still too slow. Also in the city, I managed to get the emergency systems to cut off the accelerator. Several of my fellow journalists reported a similar issue.
Generally, I get the impression that even having some of the safety systems in their least aggressive settings, the car is very much focused on ensuring the safety of its passengers. And that's a good thing, unless, of course, you like to drive enthusiastically. But I like, for example, that the departure warning system can be set to vibrate rather than an audible alert, which would be annoying. And most safety systems can be turned off with a push of a single button, which looks like that in a BMW or a Nissan. In a Nissan, it's called a safety shield. In BMW, I don't even know what it's called. But anyway, it's a button clearly with a kind of shield, a force field around the car. And the good thing is that if you turn it on, it stays on, and if you turn it off, it stays off, even if you turn the car off and turn it on back again. In the back it's dark and relatively cramped, especially behind the front passenger. I usually push this seat backwards to actually be able to see anything on the right. Now there are no USB ports, no air vents, but there is an armrest with 2 cup holders.
At 327 liters, the boot is on par with some Super Minis. There are no shopping bag hooks and the load lip is high. But with the seats folded, you get a flat loading area, and underfloor storage is nicely finished, so nothing rattles.
I also like that you can lock the car from the boot, even if there is no power tailgate.
Prices of the new Mazda 3 start at around 23,000 euro. This test car costs around 30,000. It will get more expensive when the all-wheel drive and the more powerful Skyactiv-X engine will appear later in 2019.
Mazda 3 has a lot of potential. A lot has improved and there are some interesting touches, but I get the impression that someone took a step back from chasing premium and said, stop, we can't be launching iPhone 11 as our first attempt. Let's sell the car as it is, gather feedback and leave something for the facelift. And how do you like the new Mazda 3? Drop me a comment below, share, like, subscribe and join me for more reviews every Friday. Thanks for watching and I will see you in the next one.